but everybody will soon suspect that, for instance, any crops grown outdoors in along the West Coast will be suspect. So we might even see, for instance, just as an aside, we might see BC, local to me, British Columbia, Canada, we might see the many greenhouses up there start advertising the fact that all their food is grown sheltered from the environment, simply because that will make it that much more attractive as people wonder, is this food that's being brought to me tainted? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, a lot of things, I mean, as we were taught as kids in the 50s, I know that Gary here is a youngster, so he's not aware of this, but we were taught in the 50s and 60s this whole duck and cover business. But because of the fact that I was a military brat, we had a greater degree of education about what to do should there be a thermonuclear war and you try and survive. And so, for instance, if there's radioactive fallout, you wash the stuff away, and then you get rid of the water that you use. So theoretically, you could indeed get radioactive lettuce as long as it was merely radioactive due to particulate fallout, and you could remove the layers of the lettuce that have been contaminated and safely consume the inner part. This is going to be a little bit dodgy the longer the radiation has been left on the lettuce, because water likes to absorb radioactive rays and material, and so the lettuce itself would eventually become radioactive, but initially that would not be the case. Thus, we now see why this now makes a lot of sense. It didn't initially, but let me go way back to like 2003. In 2003, I was rooting around in the data, and I started coming up with this little set of data that seemed to indicate it would be a wise investment to invest in companies that made Geiger counters and that kind of thing. And because I was looking at the markets data, I told George and a few other guys, and we got to meet some of the people in the Geiger counter industry, and I told them, well, at some point here, we're going to get a big flush of interest in your products. And they were, oh, this is great. We're good guys. We make good Geiger counters. We'll be happy with that. And we thought maybe there would be very adverse circumstances related to the Israeli mistake. And so we started really thinking that we would need to ramp up our Geiger counter information maybe in 2009 or so, and it just never materialized. And so I had sort of just like gotten rid of it and decided that, well, none of that was going to manifest. And it's like, maybe now that's really going to be the case. And if that's the situation, and of course we now see it manifesting, that everybody has an interest, at least in the United States, especially on the West Coast, of rushing on out and buying Geiger counters, dosimeters, and all these various different ways of keeping track of radioactivity. I now need to go back all the way to 2003 and investigate my interpretation notes to see what else was in that set, because maybe we can get some knowledge that may be more meaningful as to how this whole thing will manifest.
Sure. As I say, questions popping in left, right, and centre here. A question from Steve.
Yeah, keep going. When my wife says we're done, we're done. Okay. But prior to that,
we're only sovereign as long as the wife says so, eh?
Oh yeah, hey, you know how it is. You get married and you say, "Here's my life, run it."
That's the one. That's a question from Stephen. Could you please ask Cliff about the unexpected general? Someone else has picked up on the general thing there.
Yeah, that's the whole issue. We have a data set in which was described in the language that showed up in that data set a public pronouncement is the best way to put it these days, a press conference that's being handled by regular minions, which is to say politicians. And the press conference itself will have a high enough visibility because the reporters will eventually not be talking about the content that the politicians deliver so much as the disruption by a very high-ranking general who comes on and essentially takes over the press conference and delivers, if you will, the facts of the matter as opposed to the political interpretation as to whatever it is they're talking about. Again, I suspect that this will occur. And by the way, that was also related to the UFO issue. There was something relating to space, energies from space, et cetera, and a lot of this came out of the Space Goat Farts entity. But now, of course, is the perfect time for such a thing to occur, simply because we've got the politicians running around like mad, holding all these press briefings. And so the opportunity now exists for a general to get really rattled and decide that he's going to come out and tell us all the truth.
We've got a question here from a Brazilian listener. Could you please ask Cliff about things First, how accurate he thinks Patrick Gerald is in his predictions of coronal mass ejections and strength into 2011-2012. And
I believe he's extremely accurate in the coronal mass ejection component. All of his space-based stuff I find to be very, very, very credible. What I find to be less so is his projections as to how the Earth will react.
Okay, and secondly,
so this is why, by the way, I think that we're going to get to a situation where we do indeed have the potential for big disruptions from October onward.
Okay. And secondly, can you ask Clif to elaborate, because he never talks about things happening in Brazil, Latin America?
Brazil specifically, look to where you are located on the globe relative to the equator. If you're between the equator and 45 degrees, you're going to be getting into a situation where the expansion of the planet is going to start affecting the southern areas down in there. So more really where Brazil joins into Paraguay, Uruguay, and that part of the Altiplano as it descends towards the sea. We're going to see expansion events there that will basically at their core, they're going to be the same as what is happening in Japan, although the area won't react the same. So no, I don't expect Brazil, Paraguay, and Uruguay to bust up and everything, but I do suspect that the same level of pressures there are going to be impacting South America. And of course, over a bunch of expansion events, South America will rip from the mouth of the Amazon all the way through the Andes in the southern and mid part of Ecuador and form two large continents, one of which stays on the equator and one of which tries to crawl down the equatorial bulge just by the expansion of the planet underneath it. So that won't happen this December, I sure hope. But over the course of time, that's the general trend.
Right, okay. So, there you go. I hope that answers your question there. Okay, what about the new zero-point energies from space?
Well, the zero-point energy stuff is, it's as much from space as it is from, like, the ether, if you will. I mean, it's the space around us. That kind of stuff is really cool, and probably... Again, here, look, the world or the universe is manifesting to provide us a perfect setup to shove huge amounts of our human energy into the manifestation of the new electrics, as we call them, and zero-point energy, because of the nuclear crisis ongoing at the moment. I don't know if you guys are surely you're aware of what's going on in Germany and South Africa.
Yeah.
Correct? Yeah. So, and that will spread. We've got a really weird situation here. Let me back up a bit, okay? A little while ago, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, scientists, even academicians, finally accepted the idea that radioactivity is not constant. Radioactivity is variable, and no one knew this, okay? So it throws out the idea that carbon-14 is an accurate judge of date or any of this because radioactive decay happens at different rates. Well, now I'm here to say that probably one of the reasons that is occurring and that the radioactive decay is speeding up is due to the particular solar influences that we've got ongoing at the moment relative to the expansion of Earth. Therefore, it may be that even a regular nuke plant that's not hassled by earthquakes may be at risk if the radioactivity within it all of a sudden goes at an increasing level. Then all the sensors and stuff won't react appropriately, and so therefore we'll have a greater a level of radioactivity coming in, and the software may make bad decisions, and so some of these nuke plants may put themselves at risk just seemingly sitting there with no apparent cause. And the reason will be at this subatomic level because of the radioactive decay actually increasing. So we have a lot of reasons to suspect that humanity is going to leave behind our old energy, especially now that everybody here in the United States is like really irritated with the oil issues because of the Gulf oil, etc. And now all over the planet is going to be really irritated at the nuke plants. And so we're going to have to push towards something. And curiously, we've been suggesting that was going to be the case for about 10 years now. And we focused on this particular year as being the breakout year for that.
Just relating to radioactive decay, this is from Croft.
Yeah.
Ask Clif if radioactive decay, if it lasts thousands of years, and how come Nagasaki is habitable? Can't that be bad? Because they would all be dead or not be able to reproduce.
It doesn't quite work that way. Radioactive decay. I mean, if he was saying that, well, because we dropped a radioactive bomb on Nagasaki and Hiroshima, that they should be uninhabitable forever. It doesn't quite work that way. The amount of radioactivity is going to depend on what absorbs it, the kind of material that's there, how deep it is, where you set the bomb off, and all of this kind of stuff. And in fact, the radioactive decay rates, though, themselves are speeding up, and as I say, that's going to cause us all kinds of problems. This is known, it's been measured, and now, of course, it's got people like Richard Anderson and a bunch of individuals around the planet thinking that, oh, geez, time is not solid, it's flexible, it's variable, and indeed they're quite correct. And it may be that we're discovering all of this at the moment because now we're at a period of time when indeed radioactivity is fluctuating, but it didn't used to. In other words, a couple of thousand years back, it would have been safe to use carbon-14 as a dating mechanism, but now we know that it's not valid beyond 11 or 12,000 years backwards. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, this is really goofy. I mean, it's a strange planet, and we're upending a lot of our basic fundamental assumptions about stuff that we thought were as solid as rock and stone. And, a la Terence McKenna, the world is not only stranger than we imagine, it's stranger than we can imagine, and it's demonstrating that to us right at this moment.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Sorry, I'm just going through all these questions here.
Sure, go ahead.
From Starfire, what's Cliff's take and the real reason for all the USA ambassadors being recalled and a lot of the elite popping off to India?
I can tell you that I know that the ambassadors were recalled. The only factual information I can deduce from this, or conclusions that I can accurately derive, are that the powers that be are very scared of something. And then we get into the details, and it starts getting very fuzzy from that point forward. Because I've heard a bunch of conflicting stuff, and there's also been a deliberate disinformation campaign as to what was going on with the ambassadorial meeting. But it was not done out of a sense of complacency with a good feeling towards the future.
Yeah, because I'm aware that Rockefeller and co, they all kind of done a bunk to New Delhi.
It's even worse than that. I mean, they're disappearing right and left. They're all over the place, yeah. And we see some of them moving out of some of the powers that be, that particular individuals moving out of the Western hemispheres and either heading into the Himalayas, Kashmir kind of a region, or they're heading down towards Paraguay, into the mountainous regions there.
Yeah, disappearing en masse.
Yeah.
From Ruama, does Cliff see a time when things will return to what we might call relatively normal? And if so, when?
2041 is the earliest that we had long-range data indicating that a lot of the building tension issues around the planet would fade away. And of course, it's going to wax and wane, so it'll be up and down, and then gradually start fading off. We show global revolution pretty much peaks about 2017, 2019, and